The Bat gets brought back to his cartoon roots. Here's your look at the McFarlane toys. Batman: The Adventures Continue. Batman version 2, cell shaded. Batman in the Bruce Timm art style will always be the cornerstone of Batman animated universe, and that is why he's back and better than ever. As he joins the new characters in this line with all new cel-shaded paint deco, this action figure is ready for some adventures. Before we see what new adventures lie in store for the Caped Crusader, I'd like to thank the folks over at McFarlane Toys that did provide the sample of the Batman Adventures Continue, Batman version 2, or cel-shaded Batman. We could have a look at in this video. Grabbing the tape measure, let's figure out first how tall the figure stands. I always seem to want to twist things around to first figure them in inches. I don't know why I always want to start with inches. Either way, though, up to the top points of his cowl, Batman stands about 5 3/4 of an inch, or the figure's about 15 centimeters tall. Technically, version 2 Batman shares the same mold, I believe, as the new Adventures Batman we got before from DC Direct. Although, what they've done differently, though, is cosmetic to this figure, adding some additional cell shading that wasn't on the initial figure. This would have been a prime time to be able to slide over this Batman and bring in that earlier looked at New Adventures Batman so you could see the difference between the two. ... Unfortunately, I can't find the figure at the time of shooting this video. I would only certainly encourage you guys, if you have a little bit of time on your hands, to go back and check out my review of the DC Direct Batman New Adventures Batman so you can see the difference in what that original figure looked like. What I can do, though, in the meantime, is slide this one over and find at least the Batman I was able to retrieve. This happened to be the Batman that came included with the Phantasm, a set that I think is long overdue going back and re-reviewing. That's certainly something you guys would like to see for yourself. If you were to actually put them back to back now with the new Adventures Batman, he is going to be shorter. One thing they had done with the Mask of Phantasm Batman, trying to get that all out, is they did seem to want to change the mold, resulting in the figure coming across a little bit taller in size. One thing also with McFarlane taking the reins of what would have been the DC Direct line is they have omitted the display stands that would have come included with those initial figures. I'm just going to bring in the one that came included actually with the Batman one that came with Phantasm. This is what the original DC Direct stands would have looked like. A turnaround, 3/4 turnaround of the character, Batman front, Batman or side turn, 3/4 turn, side and 3/4 back. One thing also would have been with this one is a clear acrylic post that would have plugged into the back, and of course you would have had a waist clip. These waist clips never really stayed together. Either they would fall apart or they would just get way too loose over time. This one's not bad, but it could be a lot better. This doesn't come included with the newer Batman figures now from McFarlane's team, but one thing that at least they did do differently, though, if you look at the bottoms of the figure's feet, he does now have peg holes. So what you can actually do is if you happen to have one perfectly timed here, if you have yourself a DC logo display stand from any one of the things that McFarlane's done before with DC, you can use this display stand, in fact, and actually attach it now onto the new Batman Adventures figures. So the Adventure Continues figures, at least based it only on just the Batman we've looked at so far, seems to be able to attach fine to a display stand. So even though he doesn't come included with one, if you have extras laying about, just use it for that figure instead. One thing also just to bring back into is the Batman from the Phantasm. This one doesn't actually have pegs on the undersides of his feet. So you wouldn't be able to flip that step around and actually use a McFarlane display stand for these. You'd have to still use those older ones from DC Direct. While perhaps maybe Batman is currently on the stand, let's look at the rest of the accessories that come included with the figure. All of which are really just more hands than anything else. Right now, he has closed fists. But what I can do is change them out in a moment for some gripping hands. And with all of the cases of the hands, he has both left and right versions of those hands, so you can easily pop them out and decide for yourself which side you'd like to have the accessories displayed. The figure also comes included with Batarang hands, which, just to show you the difference between the two, this is the regular gripping hands, this is the Batarang hands. See, they're a little bit more configured differently. There's a little just more of a narrow slot, because he also comes included with this tiny little Batarang. So tiny, in fact, I almost thought I was going to lose it. Right now that I said that. I should have never said that. But you can take the batarang and actually lodge it in between the thumb and the fingers. Very much leaning to the idea, I think, of displaying Batman with this, provided I don't lose it. I'm going to put that to the side. Let's not say anything more about that. The figure also comes included with a couple of these hands, too, which, again, could only be perceived as gripping hands. There goes the figure falling over. I didn't think that was going to be an issue for me. Just putting the figure back up here on this display stand. I'm now glad that I actually used that display stand. Figure also comes included with a grapple line. The grapple line, I thought would have had a removable hook, and it doesn't seem to be the case. Either I'm not... There we go. I didn't really want to force it just in case it wasn't supposed to come detached, but sure enough it does. I think the original one also came detached too. But these more larger gripping hands are actually good for holding the grapple gun. Although you're going to have to heat the hand, I think, a little bit more to get them properly to grip the hand. If this is just too much hassle for it to have to worry about, don't worry. They've also thought ahead. They've also included a hand that already has the grapple line already attached inside. This isn't going to go anywhere. And this is a lot easier than having to fight the hands to pry the fingers away from the palm to get him to hold the grapple gun. Just doesn't do a good enough job. If you, by the way, did want to change out any one of the hands, now's the time to remove the display stand. Put that to the side. It's pretty easy, actually. I'm just going to go ahead and remove. Well, for example, let's go with this hand. So I want to make sure I've got the thumb facing the right way. Remove the hand from the forearm. Just remove it all together. Attach the new hand. Super easy to do. And now you've got Batman with his grapple line. Or, if you wanted to also as well, you remove the hand, and where's the hand that had the batarang? Oh, I don't want to be losing that. Let's go ahead and actually just grab a suitable hand just for right now. Pop that back into place. And because I only had it already attached to the batarang, I'm just going to stick to the idea of using this hand. Just pop that in place, try not to drop the batarang in the process. And there's Batman holding the batarang in his hand. So you pretty much get all just more hands than anything else. You get a couple of weapons, but mostly they're all hands with these figures. Okay, let's put those aside. Getting a closer look, at Batman. Now, the whole thing about this, the sell of this, is the release of this figure being cell shaded. While the body doesn't look that much changed from the original New Adventures Batman, what is now added is all this additional cell shading. See the gray that runs across the front of the shoulder here of the cape? It wasn't on the initial release. He also has shading. Let me just move the arms out of the way here. If you look at the inside, where his armpits are, it looks like Batman is heavily sweating. He actually has shading on the inside of his body. I'm trying my best not to get my finger in the way of things. I can't stand reviews where people's hands are just waving in front of whatever you're trying to look at. But you can see, yeah, Batman's heavily perspiring. And you can see darker shadowing added on the inside of his torso, the insides of his arms, and he also has it down the insides of his legs too. Sorry, Batman, I'm going to have to get a little awkward here. You can see the inside of his legs are also added to darker shadowing. It's one shade darker than the existing gray that's on his body right now. Other than that, it doesn't look like they have changed much of anything else. Again, like I said, it's all more just cosmetic from what I can remember. I really wish I still had that Batman somewhere present. Would love to have been able to bring this guy in. Head sculpt is still good. I mean, there's nothing I would have changed differently, done differently to this. Does look like they are using the same mold as before. Whether you like this design of Batman or you prefer more the Adventures, the animated series, the original look of Batman, I do think like the original animated series of Batman done by Bruce Timm is still the best Batman design out there. Now, in this case, actually, with the new Batman Adventures, he would have had just a larger black bat emblem. Gone completely is that yellow oval. I like myself the black emblem instead of the oval, but I certainly don't mind the people that actually still like the oval-shaped logo. Of course, you've got the utility belt there. That's done more in a kind of dark mustard yellow. Pockets there, of course, all the way around his body. Even the part that you wouldn't even be able to see because the cape's in the way, they've sculpted and painted the utility belt really nice. From what I can see, at least, it doesn't look as if they've done anything different to the mold, likely just reusing the molds that would have already been there when they bought up DC Direct, but they have found a way at least to add some creative touches to this. So you already had the original New Batman Adventures. You don't feel like you're just buying a duplicate, double dipping on the same figure. You're double dipping essentially on the same mold, but you're at least getting something a little bit different on the figure itself. For the articulation here on the figure, first we're going to look at Batman's head. It rotates all the way around via a ball joint. The thing always about these Batman figures is if you look at the ball joint always shifts. So if you're not careful when you do rotate Batman's head, you may find that Batman's head has decided to leave the rest of his body. You always have to then take the ball joint and wiggle it back there so it looks a little bit better. A little bit better. Again, you just want to bring it back just a little bit. It's never going to be lined up completely as well as it does when it's looking straight forward. But yeah, if you do move it too, that looks a little awkward, doesn't it? But the head does rotate either way, all the way around. You can have a head looking up, and of course you can have Batman's head looking down, and Rocket also back and forth. As for the arms, as you've already probably seen, the figure's arms only go out to about 45 degrees. That's it. However, though, you can take the arms and move them forward. You can move them back. The figure does possess a bicep, or I keep saying a bicep swivel, an elbow swivel, but does allow at least below the bicep the forearm to rotate back and forth. You can only singular hinge the elbow. You can also rotate the hands all the way around. The figure has a waist swivel, although with this figure, I've noticed on mine, is a little loose. I don't know if it's just by the fact they've used the same mold again and again, but it's a little looser on this figure, unfortunately. The legs, unfortunately, are not so unfortunate, aren't as loose. They're a lot tighter of a joint, so at least the legs are going to be a little bit strong and stable for me. With a lot of these older DC Direct figures, a lot of the problems came with like the knees and the ankles, both of which are really getting excessively loose over time. From what I've experienced so far with my only the several hours I've had the chance to kind of play with Batman here outside the packaging, his joints have still held up pretty good for tightness. Of course, long term, we don't know if that's going to be the case anyways. He does have rotation here in the boot, more the way it was assembled, but at least it's separate from the rest of his lower leg. And the figure does have an ankle pivot. Again, I'm worried about the longevity of the ankle pivot developing looseness over time. Oh, by the way, he also does an ankle pivot back and forth this way. But I worry that maybe the ankle may be loose over time. Again, it's something that seemed to be plaguing with the DC Direct line, and I hope that McFarlane's team haven't simply just inherited bad molding on these figures. Once again, I'm going to bring back in a display stand, even though it really doesn't technically come included with the figure, but just to ensure that the figure doesn't fall over. I don't think at all we've even looked at the cape, but the cape is also a very soft plastic, just like the original. Overall, it's a nice looking Batman figure. Yes, it is likely using the same mold as what we got already with DC Direct. Several of the new Adventures Continues Batman figures are essentially a rehash of the ones that we got before. This plays well into collectors that are now only getting into collecting these figures, ones that didn't get the chance to get the ones from DC Direct before and certainly don't want to pay the prices that they've inflated to online. McFarlane has now filled the gap in by providing these figures again for new-time collectors, but also tweaking them slightly so the old-time collectors like myself feel like we're getting a little bit something extra treated to these. One of my favorite things to collect that DC Direct was putting out years back was the stuff that they were doing with the Batman Animated Series and the new Batman Adventures, or was it the New Adventures of Batman? Either way, though, they had covered off almost any character you could conceive of until eventually they had to close shop. McFarlane's team, of course, took the reins of what DC Direct had planned to release and also backtracked a bit by doing some of the older Batman figures from before. That means, like characters like this, with the New Adventures Continued line, we're essentially getting the same molds as before, but they're tweaking them slightly. They're also introducing some brand new characters that were never seen before in that style, like the Batman Who Laughs, which we will be looking at in an upcoming review. But when it comes to this Batman version 2, it looks to be the same one mold-wise as what we got before. They have cell-shaded, you can't see it right now, but I'm doing it in bunny ears. They have cell-shaded the figure, which basically translates there's some light on the tops of his shoulders that normally should be blue, but because it's New Adventures of Batman and not the Batman Animated Series, I don't mind the fact it's actually gray. And then Batman has some sweaty pit arms. It's actually more shadowing, but they've actually darkened the areas of his forearms and his bicep underneath his torso, and they've also darkened the sides of his torso as well, just to give him that, quote, cell-shaded look. Again, can't see it. I'm bunny earring it right now. Accessories pretty much stay the same and consistent with what we got already before from DC Direct. So again, some swappable hands, the grapple gun, the hand with the grapple gun, and a batarang that so far I haven't lost. So far. On board, I certainly am to collect the rest of this line. You know, part of me does wish that they could have improved the molds a little bit. I don't mind the top torsos, but the lower figures, lower half, at least with the knees and the ankles, were always something that was prone to getting loose over time. My older DC Direct figures can attest to that most of those figures already have been excessively loose in the knees and too loose in the ankles that can no longer put them on display. Some of the thicker build figures aren't so bad, but the thinner, lankier build, by just the nature of the way the characters are designed in the animated series, translates to pretty loose figures if those joints happen to give way. Luckily, they haven't given way just yet here on Batman version 2, but with the proof in the mold and the way they've actually blueprinted the same construction of these figures, I hope that it's not something that's going to still carry over down the road. I don't mind that McFarlane team does take the reign and continue the trend, but I hope it doesn't also come with the curse of what DC Direct figures would have had with excessively loose joints over time. What do you guys think of Batman version 2 cel shaded? Let me know down below in the comments section, and let me know if you've been collecting any of the Adventures Continues Batman line. Also, as well, I'd like to thank the folks over at McFarlane's team that did provide the sample of the Batman Adventures Continue Batman version 2 cel shaded that we can have a look at in this video. If you guys enjoyed this video, hit it with a like. If you're loving the content you guys are seeing and certainly on board to see more of this kind of stuff, then make sure if you haven't already done so that you hit the subscribe button down below and turn on the bell notification. And as always, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.